So I'm going to talk to you really about the state of LGBTQ Arizona, and then of course why non-discrimination ordinance matter. And before I get started, my partner in crime, Janine Skinner, with our One Community team, is also on this call. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and Janine will make sure that I don't miss anything. So that we're trying to answer everyone's questions real time while you all are in person, and some of us are virtual. So we want to make sure that that everybody's questions are answered. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now. So it's really important, before we start talking about the state of LGBTQ Arizona, that we talk about the United States Supreme Court decision that came down in June of 2020. And that's known as the Bostock Decision, right? And so what happened from the US Supreme Court decision was the Supreme Court ruled that based on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, under the definition of sex in employment, sexual orientation and gender identity are now covered nationwide. However, that ruling covers employers that have 15 or more employees only, and it doesn't cover LGBTQ people in other ways, in housing and credit and public accommodations. So that decision was a big step forward, but there's still more work to do here in the great state of Arizona. So in the state of Arizona, it is still not illegal to be denied housing, to be discriminated against in public accommodations, or in employment if you have an employer, if you work for an employer that has less than 15 employees in the state, if based on your sexual orientation or gender identity. In fact, there's now, and we've been saying, for a couple of years now, only 6 municipalities. We're very excited to now say 8 municipalities have fully inclusive LGBTQ protections in place in employment and housing and public accommodations. But if you're not in these LGBTQ inclusive municipalities, you do not have, and you're LGBTQ, you don't have the same rights and protections as your non-LGBTQ counterparts, right? So that's about 50% of the state now, but we've made some pretty significant strides here in 2021. So I'm going to talk about the city or the town of Winslow, because Winslow was 6. But before I do that, I want to, and normally people have their mics open, but this is so interesting virtually. I'm just going to go through this and tell everybody what municipalities have inclusive ordinances in place. So it starts with the city of Tucson in 1999, and they're the only city to have an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance until 2013. From 1999 to 2013, only Tucson has an LGBTQ inclusive municipal ordinance. In February of 2013, the city of Phoenix, after trying for 22 years, enacts their LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. Then comes the city of Tempe in 2014. Then you have Sedona and Flagstaff in 2015. And then here comes the town of Winslow 3 years later. Winslow passed their LGBTQ inclusive ordinance in November of 2018. However, there was a citizens referendum where they moved through the town of Winslow, collected enough signatures to put Winslow's ordinance on the ballot for November of 2020. And we're really happy to tell you, we were very concerned, but the ballot measure passed in Winslow with 65% of the vote. This signature gathering, this referendum gathering comes up again here recently, right? So big news, right? The city of Mesa, March 1st, a 5-2 vote in favor of an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. At One Community, we had the honor and privilege of working alongside Mayor Giles, faith leaders, citizens, community leaders, and businesses in Mesa to move towards this ordinance, which was literally 7 years in the making. And I can tell you that everyone on our team cried. I can tell you that we were overjoyed on March 1st. I can tell you that we shared that same euphoria and belief that our state was moving forward on March 2nd. I can tell you we were still very prideful and happy and on March 3rd. And then what you see at the bottom of the slide happen. And that is a group called United for Mesa was created. It's a political action committee. It was supported by an anti-LGBTQ organization known as the Center for Arizona Policy. And they had until April 1st to collect enough valid signatures to put the Mesa Ordinance on the ballot. And that would mean that the Mesa Ordinance does not go in place. And if they have enough valid signatures, that the Mesa Ordinance would be on the ballot November of 2022. And on April 1st, United for Mesa turned in 11,505 signatures. And then the count started, right? So the city of Mesa had to start counting the signatures. We started a group called Mesa Loves Everyone because we wanted to make sure every single signature that was turned in was a valid signature. And we are very happy that the great work that had been going on in Scottsdale did not stop because of this attempt for a referendum in Mesa. So one of the things we really learned in Mesa and we created in the work in Mesa is a faith letter, which Janine leads for our team, because the LDS Church came out in support of not just the Mesa Ordinance while this signature collection was going on, but the LDS Church actually came out in support of all LGBTQ policy from a municipal standpoint and statewide standpoint in the state of Arizona. It's really important to talk about this because the church has not been there in the past, and this is groundbreaking. And so when we moved into Scottsdale, we had our faith letter and we had an open business letter. These are open letters, meaning that residents of Chandler, faith leaders in Chandler, big businesses like PayPal can absolutely sign on to this open letter. And as we moved into Scottsdale for the vote, we introduced the open business and open faith letters that had 225 business and faith leaders signed on. And those letters are open, they're available. We're happy to share those with you. I'm very happy to tell you why all this stuff is going on in Mesa. We don't know what the outcome is going to be in Mesa. Scottsdale becomes the 8th city to provide LGBTQ protections. It was a 7-0 vote. We kind of blinked and we're like, oh my goodness, they just voted and they've moved on to garbage collection. It was, this was something that the mayor and council were very adamant about. Meanwhile, back in Mesa, the signature go to the county recorder's office. And last week, the county recorder said that United for Mesa had enough signatures based on a sample they pulled to put Mesa's ordinance on the ballot. But remember, we started this little organization called Mesa Loves Everyone. And we hired experts and we looked at all 11,505 signatures. And what we found due to technical issues and errors was that we overwhelmingly believed that United for Mesa did not have enough signatures, truthfully, to go to the ballot. And so our representatives met with their representatives last Friday. This just happened on Friday. And when their folks saw the evidence that we had, they realized that they had a lack of signatures. And so United for Mesa in the referendum attempt stood down Friday at 5 o'clock at night. So that's really great work. And we are, yes, I see, someone's got a party hat up. We were very excited about that. I think it's very important that you all understand that the opposition and the fact that it's very, very important that your coalition is deeply built and that people are really educated, because there will be pushback should and when Chandler decides to move forward with your LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. So this is a huge win, not just for the city of Mesa. This is a major hurdle that is cleared for the work that you all are doing in the city of Chandler. Had this moved to referendum, it would have made your work moving forward much more difficult. So we are delighted for Mesa. We're delighted for Chandler and Glendale and other municipalities that are looking to move forward. And we're really, really just so delighted for LGBTQ Arizonans. My wife and I are like, we want to go hiking in Mesa now, right? Because we feel like it's a city that welcomes us. Okay, So I'm going to take a guess that most of you have heard of the HRC Municipal Quality Index. So many people know that the Human Rights Campaign has what's known as the Corporate Equality Index. It's a fantastic index. It really helps educate people that the Corporate Equality Index has been around for about 15 years. About 5 years ago, HRC started what is known as their Municipal Equality Index. And these are brand new numbers. These just came out at the end of 2020. So these numbers are not going to change until the end of 2021, meaning, Chandler, there's time to work on how to get your numbers up, right? So you see at the top, Phoenix, Tempe, and Tucson, they all get 100%. Then there's Flagstaff with an 88. Scottsdale was at an 80, and that was prior to their decision and unanimous vote to move forward with their inclusive ordinance. So Scottsdale probably has it in the tank to move to the 100%, right? Glendale over in the West Valley is working towards an ordinance as well. Mesa was at not a very great score of 64. Obviously, with the passage of their ordinance, you're going to see Mesa move up the ladder towards that 100%. And that means that there's plenty of room for Chandler to grow as well. So this matters. This Corporate Equality Index the Municipal Equality Index matters to businesses that are choosing which municipality they want to start their business in or they want to grow in. And so I know there was a meeting with some business leaders last week. And when it comes to attraction and retention of top talent, and of course, new business, these ordinances really do matter. And that leads me to this slide. Because we don't have statewide policy in place, these municipal ordinances are so important for 4 reasons in particular: new business, conferences and events. So Arizona's #1 driver, economic driver, believe it or not, is tourism. Conferences and events are so very important to us, attracting and retaining top talent, and then again, tourism. So we are at a competitive disadvantage as a state because we do not have a statewide update. That means municipal ordinances, like we've just talked about in the 8 municipalities that have granted them, are so important. And these are really, really good talking points when you are talking to your peers about why Chandler should move forward with an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. So here's the deal. When you treat people badly, it really costs a lot of money too, right? $64 billion a year. In fact, $64 billion a year is the ticket, the big ticket on what workplace discrimination costs. And so when you can get rid of workplace discrimination and you're treating all of your employees fairly, and remember that the state of Arizona is in business, they're in the business of creating a sustainable Arizona for each of their residents. When we get rid of workplace discrimination, think about the dollars that go towards harming people and where those dollars could be reallocated to create a better, more sustainable opportunity for all Arizonans, right? So One Community, our foundation, did a survey in 2019. We asked LGBTQ Arizonan respondents if they had ever been discriminated against. 1 out of 2 of all of our respondents, we have a pretty large universe. We reach about 40,000 Arizonans. 1 out of 2 of our respondents said that they had experienced discrimination in the state of Arizona. So you may have some elected officials that you talk to that say, I don't see discrimination. I don't see it happening. And that is probably a very true statement. But if you're not LGBTQ, you're not necessarily going to see or experience discrimination against a person based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. As you can see, it doesn't mean that the discrimination doesn't happen. And then the LGBTQ buying experience, right? So we have $917 billion worth of buying power. That's based on a census that has never asked a direct question. These numbers are also based on the 2010 census, right? So we're starting to get 2020 census data. I'm very excited to see that data. And this number is going to go up for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can't identify your sexual orientation or gender identity on the census, right? And so the way the census compiles numbers is really based on cohabitating households like mine and my wife's. And so that means that we're not doing actually a really, really good data collection on LGBTQ buying power. But here's what I can tell you. this buying power isn't just based on LGBTQ Americans, it should be based on allies as well. People that really want to align core values around equity and fairness. So this number is easily $1 trillion, well past the billion, easily $1 trillion. And here's the other thing I can tell you, of the little tidbits of information that have come out from the 2020 census, the city of Phoenix ranked, I think it was 8th or 9th, with the highest number of gay couples per capita in the nation. So we have a lot of LGBTQ Arizonans, and obviously you want folks to vote with your wallet. You want them to support your products and services. You want them to support the city of Chandler. So these are other great reasons for Chandler to adopt an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance. And then again, this is a problem looking for a solution. So when we go back to tourism, we go back to conferences and events being #1 drivers for the state of Arizona. When we look at the regions that we typically are competing against for the big game and for the ancillary dollars that come with the big game, the regions that we compete against all have LGBTQ inclusive ordinances in place. So it's really important for the city of Chandler to just level the playing field, right? Make sure that you're putting yourselves at your competitive best. Attraction and retention of top talent, right? So everyone is going back to work, and folks are hiring in increasing ways as we move out of the COVID-19 pandemic into whatever this is that we're calling our new normal. And here's the deal. 20% of millennials identify as LGBTQ. This number is more than half the generations before. I'm Gen X, so I'm a generation before millennials. It's not that there's more LGBTQ people in the millennial generation. It's that there are more people that are millennials that feel comfortable in who they authentically are. And millennials are out and they're out at work and they want to work for a workplace that is fully inclusive, right? If you're not LGBTQ and you're part of the millennial generation, 63% of millennials identify as allies. So workplace protections, equal protections in Chandler and in the state don't just matter, again, to LGBTQ millennials, they matter to all Arizonans, because millennials overwhelmingly want to live and work in a region that, again, treats all people fairly. And then here's Gen Z. This is the younger generation that is graduating from college, entering the workforce. Half of Gen Z identifies as something other than completely heterosexual. Gen Z generationally looks at sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression on more of a spectrum. So again, I'm a top hirer, I'm a top company, I'm PayPal. I want to make sure, and PayPal does such a great job of it. So Tyler, I hope you are okay with the shout out. I want to make sure that my team members are bringing their whole selves to work. I want them to, whoever they are, and however folks identify, I want them to know that they're a valuable part of the PayPal team. That's important. We want people are healthier that way. They bring, when folks bring their whole selves to work, they bring better ideas and actually add to the bottom line. So when you create an inclusive environment, you're doing the right thing for your team members and you're doing the right team for your workplace. And again, I would just ask you to remember that Chandler is in business, right? And so an LGBTQ inclusive ordinance in the city of Chandler says that you value people, and it really will help create a more sustainable opportunity in the city of Chandler as well. Okay, so what is this big beast that we're talking about? It's actually pretty simple stuff, just so you know. So we are talking about equal protections, not special protections. That's really important. I think there is a lot of education that needs to be done about what laws are already in place that protect people from discrimination in employment and housing, public accommodations in the state of Arizona. So we currently in the state, it is unlawful to discriminate based on a person's sex, based on race, based on age, based on disability, color, creed, national origin, or religion. All we're asking for statewide is to add sexual orientation and gender identity, or from a city of Chandler LGBTQ inclusive ordinance opportunity. It is really laying out all of these existing protections and adding sexual orientation and gender identity in. And again, the 3 areas where LGBTQ Arizonas lack equal protection: in housing, employment with employers that have fewer than 15 employees, and then of course, in public accommodations. Lots of folks think that this public accommodations conversation is about wedding cakes and bakers. It's not just about wedding cakes and bakers. It's also about doctors' offices and hospitals. In fact, the current presidential administration just came down with a new piece today, because the former administration had said under the Health and Human Services Agency that it was lawful federally to discriminate for doctors' offices and for medical services. That was just reversed literally today federally. But again, you want to make sure you have these regional protections in place and that LGBTQ people feel safe and comfortable when they have to get medical treatment, which is always a really vulnerable time anyway, right? Okay, and we're going to say it's not about the bathrooms. I'm going to talk more about the bathrooms than I would like to talk about, because this is where our opposition's at, and we have to walk through those talking points. But again, this is not about the bathrooms. You have 21 states, and now I need to update this slide to say 332 cities have passed and implemented fully inclusive non-discrimination updates with no increase of public safety incidences, because Mesa and Scottsdale will be implementing their inclusive ordinances in June. So that number, this slide's gonna have to change in a really, really good way. Okay, myth busting. This is literally word by word what the opposition says when they are fighting against LGBTQ inclusive municipal ordinances. This is what they said in Mesa. This is what they said in Scottsdale. This is what they will say in Chandler. And they are doubling down on transgender people, just to let you know. So they will say allowing biological men in women's homeless shelters is dangerous. So number one, a new federal protection just came down 2 weeks ago that says federally that transgender people should be placed in homeless shelters based on their gender identity. So we're myth busting this, and there's new federal protections. But I think it's really important that everybody understands how to talk about these things. And here's the bottom line. Transgender women are women. Transgender men are men. And it is illegal to do harm no matter who you are. It is illegal now prior to your inclusive policy taking place, and it will be illegal after inclusive ordinance protections taking place in Chandler. Okay, here we go. This is the big thing. This is happening nationally. We've seen these anti-transgender athlete bills in the state of Arizona. The business community came out forcefully against them. Tyler, I thank you and PayPal again for being one of 250 businesses who came out against the anti-trans athlete legislation that was introduced last year. Thankfully, although session is not over, we have not seen this bad bill at the Capitol. So our opposition is talking about this when it comes to municipal ordinances. And the whole piece is permitting biological males as athletes is unfair. So again, we're going to double down here. Trans women are women. It's just that simple. Trans men are men. It's just that simple as well. There's a new Department of Justice ruling that came about 2 weeks ago. I keep saying there's a lot of rulings coming our way. A new DOJ ruling came down federally. So it says that in schools K through 12, trans kids should be playing in the sports that they identify with. It's just that simple, right? Outside of K through 12, and this is where our opposition is really looking to cause harm and to scare people, really, you have an association called the Arizona Interscholastic Association. This association has had a transgender athlete policy in place since December 2018. Their policy looks very similar to the NCAA's transgender athlete policy, which looks very similar to the Olympics transgender athlete policy. So there is cohesive policy that is in place. And the reality is young kids just want to play sports. It's good to socialize. It's great to get that team mentality. We want to make sure that everybody gets an equal opportunity to play sports. We've only got two more and then we're through this, right? This is again what the opposition says. NDOs endanger the safety and privacy of women and girls in facilities like locker rooms, bathrooms, and showers. Again, this is absolutely totally false. It is also against the law to do harm to anyone. That is the case in the state and federally right now. That remains when you have a non-discrimination ordinance that goes in place as well. And then again, because they know what they're saying is false, now they're starting to wiggle a little bit, and that is, well, we should just be allowed to make these decisions privacy. And here's the reality. If you are a business that is open for business, you have the responsibility to be open for business to everyone fairly and on equitable terms. So that's what's going to get thrown at the good work you're all doing as you move forward with your inclusive policies for Chandler. So, and again, pretty simple stuff. An inclusive Chandler is a competitive Chandler. Here's the deal. You have bipartisan support. We did a great poll in 2018. 3 out of 4 general election voters favor fully inclusive LGBTQ inclusive policies in employment, housing, and public accommodation. So you have bipartisan support. This is not to be made about a partisan issue in any way, shape, or form. Newer poll that just came out nationwide, 83% of Americans support LGBTQ protections, and that support again is bipartisan. 68% of Republicans agree. These are important things to take to folks that maybe don't know where Arizona's at and where Americans are at when it comes to inclusive protections. And then of course, it's just good for business. A great piece came out a few years ago that said when the state updates our policies and we become LGBTQ inclusive, we're going to add $2.8 billion to the state's bottom line. So it's not going to be quite that large of a number, but as you can imagine, when Chandler chooses to update your current protections and become LGBTQ inclusive, it's going to add dollars to just create a more sustainable Chandler for everybody that lives and works and plays in Chandler. And then here's ways that you can get more involved, right? So if you represent a business and you want to join our member-based coalition, you can do that by going to onecommunity.co. All businesses and organizations, we encourage you all to sign our open business letter. We're happy to send that link. If you're working with faith-based leaders that are interested in the faith letter, we'll absolutely send you our faith letter as well. You can support our educational work by visiting our foundation. And then if you haven't yet, we always love it when businesses and everyday Arizonans take the Unity Pledge at openaz.com. The Unity Pledge, by the way, is the largest equality pledge in the nation. It really helps us educate folks on how to create equitable treatment and really these LGBTQ inclusive municipal ordinances. And where the municipalities go, the state will go. So I want to thank you and congratulate you all for your great work, because as you move forward in Chandler, you're moving our state forward as well. And I'm sure your folks are going to talk about this, but support the Chandler Ordinance. We have talking points you can share on social media. And then of course we are awesome, iconic, open for business to everyone signs, which we would love to see hanging in retail stores in Chandler. And that's all I got. I see that there's maybe a question or two.
Thank you.